in the Fredonia Mountain Nature Resort. It's a residential community on the Cumberland Plateau, overlooking the Sequatchie Valley. We have about 2,100 acres that is privately owned lots. The developer a few years ago set aside over 1,000 acres into conservation easements. And in 2016, we found that the HWA had made its way to our development. And we started treating in 2017. We're a volunteer organization within our community. Our expenses are paid by the Homeowners Association, and we spend between $1,000 and $1,600 per year. This is only about 0.5% of our total HOA budget, so it's readily accepted to the residents. The first year was a little bit higher when you had to purchase equipment. Right now, we're just basically buying supplies, the chemical and the rubber gloves and so on. Currently, our volunteers are either retired or semi-retired. We have 3 to 6 volunteers at each treatment session, and we primarily use soil drench, and each session we use about 4 of the 48 fluid-ounce Nalgene bottles of mix. Our sessions last 1 to 3 hours, depending on the team size, the terrain, and the size of the trees being treated. Our schedule is 2 sessions per week from early spring until late fall, but we have about 30% cancellation due to weather or schedule conflicts, so we usually get in 45 to 50 sessions per year. Here's a topo map of our area. We have several creek systems. We have one here. I assume you can see my cursor.
Okay. Yep, I can see it. Yep.
Okay. We have this creek system, Johnson Mill Creek and Merle's Branch, where we have quite a few hemlocks. We have this creek here, Stone Creek, where we actually have about twice as many hemlocks than we have over here. As you can see from the contour lines, this is a very steep area along Johnson Mill Creek. This is a much easier area to treat. The conservation easements, there's one up here, and the state treated over 600 trees here in the past 2 years, and got this area completely covered. There's also one that's going to be conservation easement, but the paperwork hasn't been completed over in this area. And there are some really big hemlocks in this area. I look forward to being able to get those treated. And there's an aerial view where you can see the creek valleys in here, the conservation easement that did get treated here, and the one that will hopefully in about a year that paperwork will be finalized, and we can request assistance in getting that treated. I live right there. Okay, here's a couple of photos I took. The one on the left was taken on April 1st a few years ago, where I pulled the woolly sac away from the egg and exposed the eggs. To give you a scale, that the diameter of that pen is 1/32 of an inch. And here's one I took June of last year, early June, after they had hatched and started crawling off to find a spot at the base of each needle. So that tree was a small one near where I walk frequently. It's way away from any other hemlocks. And because it was so distant, they hadn't been treated yet. And then this past year, I found that it had been infested, and it was immediately treated. Okay, getting started. Of course, communications is the most important thing. You've got to let people know that you've got the problem, that you're going to work on the problem, you need help, and you need the financial support. Communications. If you're in a development with a homeowners association, they usually have a newsletter, or maybe there's a community mailing list. A lot of our residents subscribe to an app called Nextdoor, where you can communicate with people within the residence without having a big mailing list, if they subscribe to the app. And then, of course, you have your social groups. If you have a hiking group, that'd be a great source to find volunteers. A team leader, you've got to have somebody willing to take charge. Someone who will make it their top priority and has the time to commit and is able most of the year. We have some residents that live half the time in Florida and half the time in Tennessee, so that doesn't work out for them. And getting organized. Of course, one of the first things we did was contact the Division of Forestry to get their assistance. At that time, I contacted Nathan Hugo, and he came down and gave a presentation and looked over our situation. And then we had another meeting where the strike team came in and demonstrated how they do treatments. You need to find an acceptable number of team members. It's difficult to work with less than 3 people when you're getting out there. So 3 to 6 works great. If you get 6 or more, the person doing the record keeping gets a little overwhelmed. But anyway, it's good to have a team of about 4 or 5. You need to evaluate and select your treatment methods, taking into consideration convenience and cost. Jackie talked about how people use different treatment methods. We looked at over the various methods and decided what we wanted to do. And in terms of cost, it can vary considerably. I'll show more about that later. You also have to decide what trees you want to treat. Do we just treat the larger trees in good health, or do we go after all of them? Well, we decided that once we're out there, we get all of them. Now, you do have the chemical limit to be concerned with, but because it's in our community and we have pretty good access, it doesn't bother us to come back the next year to finish up an area. You need to decide on how you want to schedule your treatment sessions, how long they last. As I said, we shoot for 2 days a week. We're set up for Tuesday and Friday mornings, weather permitting. We meet at 8 or 8:30, and the session lasts an hour to 3 hours, just depending. You also need to determine your record keeping requirements. And I have a slide to discuss that more in a few slides on. Of course, there are administrative responsibilities. You just don't walk out in the woods and start pouring chemical out. You've got to order equipment and supplies, set up and maintain your record keeping, develop and disseminate procedures and safety information, prepare for each session, that I, as the leader, do most of the preparation. So that when the other guys show up, all they have to do is get their gear together and we head out. You have to send out treatment session reminders. Contact property owners, to get their permission to enter their property to do the treatments. We've not been denied yet. We like to keep our community updated twice a year. I'll send out an update, and I've made some presentations at community meetings, the HOA meetings, or whatever. When I talked about sending out procedures, here's one that I did for our soil drench. About a third of it, I provide information on the insecticide. Again, let people know what they're working with. Well, I also had available the safety data sheets. There's a section on getting it prepared, how much you have to mix, whether it's the water-soluble packets or the flowable liquid. And then actually the procedure itself is rather short on what you do. Of course, half of it is where you can't treat. Now back to record keeping. Why? We need to track our chemical usage and stay within the federal limits. We're not as meticulous as what the state strike team does because our situation is different. For example, if I know we're going to treat trees on Randy Overton's lot, I know what size lot he has. I know it's 4 acres, but the hemlocks are located on about 3 acres. I know that when I mix up 4 bottles of the imidacloprid solution, that's 192 fluid ounces. Well, we're allowed 181 per acre, so that will treat just a little over an acre. So I know that when I treat the trees on Randy's lot, I need to get done in 3 sessions, or a little under 3 sessions, to stay within that limit. And then one other way to gauge it is an acre is a square about 208 feet by 208 feet. When you get out there and you're looking over the area you're going to treat, if you know that it's very densely populated and you're not going to cover an acre, you know you're going to have to limit yourself in that area and come back a second time a year later to finish the treatment. Or if you know that it's sparsely laid out and you're going to go well over 200 feet, then those 4 bottles, you can use it and not worry so much about the limit. But we can check ourselves on that. Of course, the record keeping also helps you keep track of where you've treated and where you still need to treat. And it also is good to justify the expense and to have that sense of pride in what you've accomplished. When we report the number of trees treated, how much we spent, it's when you're treating for less than $1 a tree, it makes a big impact. Data to record. Obviously, you want the date. We put down a general location like Overton's lot or Lower Stone Creek on the east side or something like that. Plus, we record the GPS coordinates. We record the size of the tree, the method we're using, and the dosage. And in our case, the first time through, we tag the trees. For the trees 4 inches and larger in diameter, we put a numbered aluminum tag on the tree. And actually put a piece of green vinyl tape with that to help it with visibility. So we could, when we go back into the area, we can see where we left off and where we need to start back up. paint better than tagging. Well, we probably overdid it a little bit with our tagging, but because we have numbered tags and we have our records, we can tell the second go around that, hey, it's been 5 years since we treated tags 1 through 575. We want to be looking for that. If we see a tag number 1500, that was much later, and we'll come back to that in 2 or 3 years. If you're going to cover the entire area in 1 year, paint's a great idea. You know, you covered this area, you marked all the trees, and when you come back, you don't have to worry about whether some of the blue spots are 5 years old and some of the blue spots are 2 years old. So, you know, you have to look at your own situation as to what works for you, how much trouble you want to go to, and try to think ahead into the not only the first time through, but the second and third time when you're going to go back through and retreat trees. Your team members, willing, able, and have the time. Like I said, we're mostly retirees. Someone with a full-time job and a family, they're not going to be able to spend the time that we spend. Able, well, as long as you can bend over or crawl up a hill, I consider you able. We have to consider other volunteer activities. Retirees can get pretty busy at times. We have some that work at our Veterans Memorial Park, some that work on trail committees within our organization, and so on. So that's why we scale our sessions back so that we can find the days that it's most convenient and the length of time that people are willing to accept. And that also goes into the next item, one farther down, you know, considering the age we are. We can't go all day and expect to come back in a couple of days. Also, don't expect all your volunteers to show up again. I mean, we'll have some people show up once or twice and decide it's not their thing. Either physically, they don't care for it, or they don't want to commit the time. That's fine. If they get out and try and it doesn't work for them, I have no problem. Because of the makeup of our team, we try not to push it, and we try to be safe. We have had a few falls, some slips, but for the most part, we've done pretty good. You need to consider the terrain and weather when setting up a session. We'll avoid the more strenuous areas during the hot, humid weather. We'll save them for nicer weather. Of course, you have to consider the rainfall. You want to avoid treating right after a heavy rainfall or when there's one predicted within the next day or two. Take time to enjoy the surroundings. The hemlock forests are beautiful places, the creeks, the hillsides. Take it all in. Have some fun. We joke around quite a bit. I keep saying I'm working on pay raises. Of course, that's on a percentage basis. And 20% of zero is still zero, so I can offer about anything. We joke about each other. We have a good time out there. Avoid burnout. Since this is quite formidable task, to treat as many hemlocks as we treat, doing it many months out of the year, and knowing that once we finish first round, we need to be ready to start a second round. So we do take breaks from the regular schedule. We take a winter break, you know, once the holiday season starts, we'll break and then start back up when the weather gets a little nicer. If I'm heading out of town for a week, I give the team a week off during the summer or whatever. So, you know, it's we're doing a good job, but we don't have to kill ourselves doing it. Here's on the left is a picture from this past year with our team. Of course, one person missing taking the picture. There is a, on the tree on the left there, you can see the aluminum tag. You can probably just barely tell there's a tag there, but you can see the green ribbon we attached to help with visibility. And on the right is some of the steep terrain we deal with. If you look carefully, there's somebody's hat right there. Somebody down behind the fallen tree. And there's my dog in the lower left corner there. She's our mascot. She goes on all our treatment sessions. Okay. We use two methods, soil drench and trunk or stem injection. We all know about soil drench. It's quick, easy, inexpensive. Can be used for any size tree. Well, I also know the disadvantages of not being able to use it in rocky soil, steep slopes, near water sources, or when heavy rains are expected, or during extremely dry conditions. The only limitation on, well, there are two limitations on trunk injection. Being able to safely position yourself. If these trees on a steep slope and you're trying to put injectors all the way around and it's a big drop off down to the creek on one side, it can be challenging, and you have to remember safety first. Also, it can't be used on real small trees. You don't want your hole to end up going all the way through the tree. That doesn't do any good. But the major disadvantages are it requires a large number of injectors or injection points. If you're using the reusable injectors, you have to come back in 2 days to retrieve the injectors. Or if you're using the disposable, you need to come back in a day or two to pull those and dispose of them. The injectable formulation is very expensive. I looked into this quite a bit and decided that I could mix my own and save a lot of money. I can't recommend that you do that, but I'm just telling you what I do. As I said, soil drench is preferred, and we actually have done fewer trunk injections than I initially expected. But the thing to remember about soil drench is that imidacloprid has a very low solubility in water. When you mix it up to have 1 gram imidacloprid in 1 fluid ounce of water, that's a 3.35% mixture. So most of that insecticide is in there as a suspension and not being dissolved into the water. So it is important to shake the container vigorously before each pour. When I mix it up in the morning before we head out, shake it up good, get to the site, shake it up good, remind everybody to shake it up again before they pour it out around the tree or into the measuring cup. And to emphasize the amount of water needed, let's say you're treating a 20-inch DBH tree using 16 fluid ounces of the treatment. To totally dissolve that imidacloprid, you need another 7 gallons of soil moisture to dissolve it. So anyway, the bottom line is shake well, keep it suspended, scratch down the more soil where it will more readily be taken up by the tree. Fortunately, we haven't had a drought like 2016 in the years we've been treating. So we've had a reasonable amount of rain throughout the year for most of the last 5 years. So we've rarely encountered conditions where we thought that it was too dry to do the soil drench. But should we have another drought, then we will probably interrupt our schedule. Trunk injection is our second choice. For it to work properly, you need a mixture where it's totally dissolved. That means you need, generally, most injectable formulations contain 5 to 17% imidacloprid, much more than what's soluble in water. So you need a strong solvent free of water. Injectors are placed about every 6 inches around the trunk of the tree. We have 50 injectors. So in one session, we can treat, for example, 12 8-inch trees, or only 4 24-inch trees. But in a typical session, we'll have a mix of sizes and we'll treat 7 to 8 trees. And then again, we have to return in 2 days to retrieve the injectors. Here's a few photos. Here's a hemlock, and growing on the uphill side of it is this large poplar tree. And on the downhill side, it's steep, rocky, leading right down to the creek. Obviously, soil drench is not going to work. We don't want the chemical going up into the poplar, into the flowers. Also, we don't want the poplar robbing most of the imidacloprid away from the hemlock tree. So we go to the trunk injection. We found that we take a fiberglass tape like you find in the sewing department at Walmart, clip it on the tree to help us space out the injectors. Insert the injectors at a slight downward angle. Because this is such a large tree, and we know that the thickness of the sapwood is close to 2 inches, we know we can do it up here at a convenient height and not have to go down into the root flare. Over on the lower right corner, you'll see a smaller tree where we go down close to ground level into the root flare so that we get that thicker layer of sapwood that you find at the root flares so that it can be taken up. Of course, the ejection amount for a small tree like that is smaller too, so it's, on a big tree like this, that might be 8 or 10 milliliters in each injector. Here, this would be 3 to 5. So even though it's probably taken up slower because it's a small tree, there's less of it to be taken up. And this is one of the ejectors taken apart. This is the excuse me, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the injector. Well, it'll be in the slide. Oh, excuse me, there it is. Chemjet injector. They cost around $12 each. One problem with them, the barrel here has markings for 5, 10, 15, and 20 milliliters. But the notch here where you can lock it after you fill it, before you put it in the tree, is only for 20 milliliters. So I had to go through and cut new notches in these 4 ribs around the shaft in order to be able to lock it at like at 10 milliliters. So that's a little bit of a pain. Because in my thinking, I'd rather put in 10 milliliters closer apart than have only 3 or 4 spread around a tree. And most of the instructions recommend placing them about 6 inches apart. Now, when it comes to injectable, if you read all the different labels and instructions from the various suppliers, it's both confusing and inconsistent. Here's the recommended dosages for Imajet 10, a 10% solution of imidacloprid. They have low to moderate infestation, moderate to heavy, and they have a box here for up to 12 inches, and then different boxes for 12 to 24, and above 24, they don't distinguish on infestation. So that's a little bit difficult to use to set up a table. So what we did was we picked a line that basically goes through all of these boxes, and we use that to determine our dosage. We do not look at levels of infestation. We were actually more concerned about getting several years worth of treatment as opposed to how bad the infestation is. So anyway, we picked this, and we have found that this is providing us the same or better length of treatment as the soil drench recommendations. Now, here's a comparison of the different dosages. The previous slide, this was milliliters per dBH as a function of dBH. It's a nice straight line. When you put it in terms of grams of imidacloprid versus dBH, you get a curve. It's basically a second order equation that fits this. And you'll see that what we use in the brown is pretty well matches what was recommended back in 2017 for an economical and effective use of the imidacloprid. You also notice that for trunk injection, we're using half the amount of imidacloprid as we do for soil drench. This dosage rate for injection was certified, was verified by a third-party source, according to I think it was ArborJet who recommended this level of dosage. And it does make sense. We know that all of this is getting into the tree. On the soil drench, we're not so sure. Okay. Working with the insecticide and solvents. Read the material safety data sheets. They'll tell you all the risk and safety, the required personal protective equipment. Do an internet search on the materials being used. You'll find some interesting stuff. found one article about a guy in China who tried to kill himself by drinking some of this injectable mixture of imidacloprid and a solvent. Oh, he survived. He spent 3 days in the hospital with vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, headaches, dizziness, but he survived. But anyway, being a chemical engineer, I was curious about what I could find out there before we got started, and also what protective equipment to wear. And primarily, it's the nitrile gloves. I wear more than that when I mix up everything, but in the field, you know, long sleeves, nitrile gloves are good things to have, and I supply the nitrile gloves to the team rather than them having to provide their own. Get into a routine to avoid accidents. You know, as we saw in some previous information, if you're mixing the stuff up, stay a good distance away from the creek in case there is a spill. Avoid exposure to the chemicals and solvents. When it comes to solvents for the injectable solution, I found there are 3 fairly common ones used. Dimethyl sulfoxide, that's readily available. It's pharmaceutical grade. People rub it on for joint pain or whatever, which is a concern when you're using it with the insecticide. If it readily absorbs through the skin, it'll carry the dissolved insecticide with it. So again, use your protective equipment. NMP is a solvent that I was very familiar with. It was readily available until just a couple of years ago. But then there was a study that found that if you fed it to female rats, their offspring were smaller than normal. So now it's classified as a reproductive toxicant, and it's pretty hard to find anymore. THFA, it's probably the least toxic of all of them, but it's not labeled for consumer use. So for the do-it-yourselfer, it's not available. Again, I'm not recommending that you mix your own, but I'm just telling you that I have decided to use that option. Now, this explains some of why I made that decision. Let's look at the cost. The flowable imidacloprid 2F, and some people call it 2L, use it for soil drench. I buy it by the gallon. When I order some in December, it cost me $70. That same place is now asking $120 for it, so watch out. I found that you can still buy it for $70 from some other places, but the prices bounce around, and with inflation right now, you need to shop around. On a per gram of active ingredient of imidacloprid, it's costing a little under 8 cents per gram. And so to treat a 20-inch DBH tree, I'm spending $1.22. The water-soluble packets can be more convenient depending on your situation. If you're going out all day, you're going to have to haul a lot of water if you're going to have to mix this stuff, mix the flowable up. That's where the water-soluble packets come in handy, but you are paying for convenience. For 4 1-ounce packets, found a price of about $36. That comes out to be a little over a quarter of a dollar per gram, quite a bit more than the 2F. And that same tree would cost me $4 to treat. What about injections? Well, a few years ago, they came out with the Merit injectable in their using a disposable injector. It's a TreeTech, I believe, is the brand of injector. You can buy a case of 100 6-milliliter injectors containing 17.1% imidacloprid for $564. That comes out to be $5 per gram, or $45 to treat that one tree. Well, if you have a 20-inch tree right on the edge of the creek, and it's a nice tree and you want to save it, and you can't use soil drench, and you don't have too many of these trees, you may want to buy a case, go out and spend the $564, and be able to treat, say, about 10 of these trees, 20-inch trees, with those injectors. So, you know, if you have a relatively small number of trees that you can't treat with soil drench, this is an option. It's rather expensive, but if this only accounts for 10% of your hemlock trees, on average, it's not that bad. You can buy injectable mixture just in a bottle. Use it with an injection system or reusable injectors. The best price I found was for the Moget Homicide HP. A case of 4 1-liter bottles was $1,689. That's $3.84 per gram of imidacloprid, or not counting the cost of the injection or the injectors or the injection system, it'll be $32.50 a tree for a 20-inch tree. Well, I'm cheap, so I started thinking about it and looking around and figuring out what to do. So I figured out if I buy a liter of dimethyl sulfoxide, which costs about $40, and I buy 122 grams of imidacloprid, which costs me $32.40, I can mix up 1 liter for $72.40, and my cost per gram of I'll call it active ingredient, it's easier to say, is down to about 60 cents per gram. And I can treat that tree for $5. But again, that does not include the cost of the injector system or the injectors, and you need to prorate that cost over how many trees you're treating by this method. Here's a short list of injectors and injection systems. The ArborJet QuickJet injection kit was mentioned earlier. Its current price is $659. That's about $80 more than it was last year. So again, watch out for inflation. The one problem I have with this, and I'd like Sue's input here in a minute, is that their system requires a plug be put into the hole you drill in the tree, and that plug has a built-in check valve so that once you inject that amount of solution out of your injector system into the tree, that check valve keeps it in the tree. And each one of those plugs costs 50 cents. Now for this 20-inch DBH tree, I need 10 of those 10 injection points. So that adds $5, or doubles my cost to use that. Plus, I'm still have to prorate cost of my kit. We're using the ChemJet injectors. You can buy them in, you know, however many you want. 30 injectors cost $388. 50 injectors, they give you a little bit of a discount, $622 for 50 of them. Again, the problem with it is the take up is rather slow. A lot of times it'll be empty in a day, but we play it safe. We come back in about 2 days. Now, what happens if you forgot to unlock one of the injectors to allow the spring to push the stuff in? Or what if you didn't clean out the hole that you drilled in the tree very good and some shavings plug up the tip of the injector? You come back and it's not empty. Well, I don't want to have to come back another 2 days. So basically, we go to basal treatment. We'll lock that injector, pull it out, and then release it and slowly spray it on the trunk of the tree, and we figure it'll get in. It's not preferred, and it doesn't happen too often. We try to be careful and make sure that after we get the injector in, we unlock it. Then after we get them all in, we go back around again to make sure they're all unlocked. But occasionally you mess up, or occasionally one plugs. How have we done in 5 years? Well, here's the number of trees we've treated. We do break them down by size. Greater than 4 inches DBH, we've treated over 6,000. 1 to 4 inches, over 6,500. And less than 1 inch, close to 6,500. Total of 19,000. We still have one area to treat, the most difficult to get to. Save the worst for last. Probably about 200 trees there we need to finish up this spring, and then it's time to start over. And as I said, we've treated for 5 years. In this past year, in the fall, we found HWA had returned to trees that we had treated in the spring of 2017. So we're getting 4 years of protection from our treatments. Not quite as good as the 5 to 7 we'd hoped, but still, that's pretty good. Now here's the biggest hemlock we've treated so far, 38-inch DBH. The guys love the big trees. A 40-ounce pour on one tree, and it's like that much closer to quitting time. And here's a picture, an obvious example of not being a candidate for soil drench. What you see there on the tree is I carry some push pins and red vinyl tape. So as we go through doing our soil drench, if we find a tree that we can't do soil drench, we mark it so that we can find it again and come back and do the trunk injection. And once we get half a dozen or so trees that we know we need to come back to, then we'll schedule a session for trunk injection. And generally for trunk injection, it's just the 3 people's money. You have one person drilling holes, put the tape around the tree, figure out what the dosage is and the spacing on the injectors. One person filling the injector, and the third person coming behind the guy drilling the holes, placing the injectors. So we can do that, get that done in about 10 minutes, 15 at most, and be on our way to the next. So when we go to do, say 8 trees for trunk injection, because we use up our 50 injectors with 8 trees, we're out there for no more than an hour and a half. And here's my contact information. Now, if I'm out hugging hemlock trees, I probably don't have cell phone service. This is on one of the conservation easements. This tree was treated 2 years ago by the state. I'm trying to remember now. It was over 600 trees they treated in that conservation easement. So we're very appreciative for their efforts in helping us in areas that are not part of our HOA, but are in conservation easements. And I guess that wraps it up.
That's great, Hugo. Thank you so much. Hugo, I don't know if you can access the chat, but we have some questions that popped up during your presentation.
Okay, let me, how do I get out of here? Back to my.
Yeah, there should be a menu when you move your cursor around, and then there should be a box with an X in it.
There we go. Okay. Okay, yeah. Sue's comment on the, well, let's start at the top. How are we on time?
We're doing all right. We've got 10 minutes till the next presenter.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Yes, I'm making my own injectable formulation. But, you know, I'm not a licensed, don't have a pesticide license. I can't do it for you. I can tell you what I'm doing, but you're on your own. The QuickJet, I saw where there are two different ArborJet systems. One's a lot more expensive than the other, but having not purchased either one, I can't give you any details. That's Sue's comment about the QuickJet being over $2,000.
Yep. That's the QuickJet Air, so that's the one with the compressed air.
Yeah, that's the ArborJet.
Yeah.
And there's another system called Arbor Systems.
Yeah.
Arbor Systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ArborJet is what I compared to. The next comment was slow uptake. Yes, the solvent is a much larger molecule than what water is, so it's taken up quite a bit slower than what water. If you were able to use a water-based system, when I tested water on these injectors, it was a matter of minutes and it was empty. But with the injectable solutions, it's hours or days. Yeah, sometimes you know, going to a different hole can help. Initially, we tried replacing the injector and coming back, but if you only have a handful of injectors, like out of the 50, only 2 of them didn't empty, that's a lot of trouble to replace and then come back again. So we go to the use what's remaining in the injector on the trunk itself. Let's see. Did I miss any questions?
No, I don't think you missed any questions. Margot was just giving you a cheer on for doing such a great job. You know, we have so many communities that reach out to us, you know, like me for the state and Margot who works with HRI, of private landowners who are really looking for assistance. And Hugo is a great example, and his community is a great example of communities getting together and there being a leader in that community who takes, you know, the bull by the horns, so to say. But we have others here that are also in our group. I know that Bob Lee treats for his community that he lives in, and some of the people who have homes there as well assist him. And there's others here. I know that we had Jim Ohatnick. He also treats and offers assistance to people who live in and around his community by offering people to use his PPE gear, his Nalgene's, and then ask for advice because he's been treating trees. So Hugo, thank you for coming on. Yeah, I'll get to you in a second, Margot. Thank you for coming on. My one comment to you is I really appreciated how you talked about considering that everybody's a volunteer that you have, and you have to consider the volunteers. You have to consider their age, their abilities. And when you talk about sessions, for me, you know, with the HWA strike team, it's a full-time job. They go out Monday through Thursday and just hike their butts off, you know, treating hemlocks. But your group is great because you create, you know, sessions where you go out and you fill 3 or 4 Nalgene bottles, and that's it, and you're done. And it's not painful for the most part, and you guys don't spend all day. You know, sometimes you do. So I think it's great to remember that if you are a community that's looking for volunteers to help you, there is sometimes you are chasing the clock depending on infestation levels and how long that infestation has been there and the tree health. But you have to remember that a human person's safety and health and passion for doing this work is the most important thing. So Hugo, kudos to you for being such a great community leader and team leader. And also, thank you for the many times that I've given your phone number and email out to people, and you've just graciously assisted them and helped them. So thank you so much, Hugo. Margot, do you have a question?
Yeah. I just thought it might be worth mentioning because Hugo has taken on using stem injection as the primary method for treating some of those trees growing close to water, or on top of rocks, as that picture so wonderfully demonstrated. And we have chosen to use basil bark spray for some similar situations. I didn't mention this in my presentation, but I thought it worth mentioning that even though New York State and Michigan are both utilizing basil bark spray, they are also using stem injection, and they're not doing as much soil drench. So they turn to stem injection when they're close to water. So they have a larger setback from the water's edge than we're using in North Carolina. In Michigan, it started with a 50-foot setback, and everything within 50 feet, they wouldn't even bark spray. They would only stem inject or not treat it. Now they're down to a 25-foot setback, at least for some of the trees that are treated through the state. And that's a response to the fact that they have had a history of some particularly detrimental activities unrelated to hemlock treatments that make their stakeholders super concerned about impacts on the water. In New York, I believe that the state is currently using a 3-meter setback from the water so that they won't do basil bark spray within about a 3-meter setback. And that's not a requirement in the state, but it's what the state's choosing to do for the treatments that they're in charge of. Others might be using a different setback or none at all. So I just think it's worth mentioning because I wanted to make sure I didn't give the wrong impression in my presentation that everybody is out there doing the same thing that we are. And so Hugo's presentation helped me remember to mention that.
All right. Well, thank you, Hugo, so much for your presentation. Also, thank you, Sue, for adding your comments in there. And I hate to do this to you, Hugo, but please, people, take advantage of Hugo's invitation to reach out to him for questions and support. He really is passionate and cares just not even more than myself when it comes to hemlocks and his efforts. So, and he's a great resource for private landowners who have questions. So thank you, Hugo.
All right, you're welcome.